What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Hidden Blade, the new film starring Tony Leung, the latest Chinese blockbuster to get a small release here in the States. This, not as big a deal, not as widely watched as Full River Red or The Wandering Earth 2, which I did review. Check the channel for that. But Hidden Blade did make over $100 million. It was still a very successful film as one of the Lunar New Year new releases over in China. And this had my attention for really two reasons. One, the setting. It's a noir film set in the World War II backdrop, 1930s era, specifically the second Sino-Japanese War, the war between China and Japan, kind of alongside World War II. And also because it stars the great Tony Leung, one of, if not the most significant and most celebrated actors in the history of Chinese and Hong Kong cinema. You know, Americans probably recognize or remember Tony Leung was the villain in Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings 2 years ago. He does not really work in Hollywood all that much, though, so you gotta meet him where he is. In this case, that would be in The Hidden Blade. And this is a film that, again, I'm happy I got to see it in person. The releases are small for Chinese films here in the U.S. and not a lot of showtime. So when I did see it, it was completely packed, probably the most packed theater I've been in a while. Um, and this is a movie that I really wanted to like, really wanted to love. Even it's kind of right up my alley in terms of, uh, just if you know the history at all. Japan is operating a puppet regime, puppet government over China out of Shanghai, and you have kind of all this spycraft going on. uh, Enemies on all sides, all these different factions. You have the Japanese government. You have the Chinese people working with the Japanese government, the collaborators. You have people resisting this Japanese occupation, and those people would include Chinese nationalists, in terms of the Shanghai Shek, Republic regime, and also the largely growing Chinese Communist faction that, of course, people know will eventually come to power. And you have the nationalists and the communists, forming a temporary alliance to get rid of the Japanese so that they can resume fighting amongst themselves for the control of China. You don't know who is on what side, all this espionage, double agents. Sounds great. Sounds fun, right? And when you have Tony Leung as a spy chief, like, again, sign me up, right? But I think the issue with Hidden Blade is it was quite long. It was over 2 hours, which wouldn't necessarily be an issue, but the movie is distractingly non-linear. I celebrate movies that are non-linear all the time. It's often done to great effect. In the case of Hidden Blade, which is directed by Hidden Blade is just like kind of needlessly confusing in its non-linearity. Like the audience is kind of kept at arm's length in terms of when things are taking place or what characters are really up to for a long stretch of time. And to me, it kind of dulls the effectiveness of big movements in the plot, which I found just a bit disappointing. Like I'm just kind of sitting there trying to track what's happening, and it kind of takes you out of like the dramatic heft of what you're supposed to be watching. In the process of this, I think really across the board, all the female characters are really underserved. They have very little to do, and also the nonlinearity doesn't really help them. Like you have long stretches of time where you don't spend any time with them at all, and like then when you do meet them, you're supposed to care about their relationships with these male characters you know a bit better. Like, I just don't think it really works, and man, I just found that really disappointing. And like when the movie ends, I'm just kind of sitting there like, if this was just told in a more conventional manner, I think it's like significantly better. You don't even have to change that much. Really, just order this in a more coherent manner. Maybe take away. There's a few subplots with some Japanese soldiers, for example. You probably could eliminate that, and it would have made a big difference. Just kind of focus, I think, on like the espionage and the double crossing between the Japanese government and the Chinese collaborators and the people fighting against them, and like knowing like who's on what side, right? Like Tony Leung as director, he's working with the Japanese government. Is that where he's siding with? I think if you're going into the movie, you can probably understand and predict the idealistic leaning of this film in terms of what kind of message this movie is going to send. That being said, I don't think it's like overtly propaganda uh, in any way. Like, yes, it's going to be pro-communist. That shouldn't have come as a shock. At the same time, though, if it wasn't pro-communist, what would that be? It would be pro-Japanese occupation. I don't think it's fair to expect something like that to come out when it wasn't in sync with reality, right? So yeah, is it going to be a bit rah rah about the Communist Party that will eventually take over? Yes. I don't think it's in your face. It doesn't really distract from the movie at all. Wasn't a big deal to me. But yeah, I just was a bit disappointed in that plot. However, what I did like was Tony Leung. I think as people know, yeah, he's in his 60s now, but man, put a cigarette in that guy's hand, watch him smolder. The looks he gives with his face, with his eyes, he's just a tremendous actor. People know this by now. I also was quite enamored with uh, Hiroki Mori as Watanabe, who plays kind of like the central Japanese government official that you come to meet, and his relationship with director He. Really great scene stealer. Honestly, the way he would chew on scenery and kind of like a likable villain in terms of I don't think he was like a caricature of like a negative imperialist Japanese person by any means. I liked him a lot. I liked their relationship, and just kind of a lot of these scenes are just people talking in rooms. And I think because you have great actors, and largely when the movie gets to be about individual moments, the scenes are pretty good. The scenes are pretty well written. It's just like the connective tissue of the movie that really falls apart for me. I think the one of the weaker elements of the movie though would be Mr. Yi, who's kind of like a protege, like spy agent under director He, a young up and comer in a certain sense. He's played by Wang Yibo, who is like a Chinese like idol, like pop star actor, multi talented guy. I don't think his performance is all too good. No offense to him, but I just don't think he really was strong enough at carrying some of these emotional beats that he eventually has to deliver on. Just a bit wooden, a bit stoic in his face, and like when you're putting him up against some of these other more experienced actors, uh, it kind of shows that he's not quite up to snuff with them. Not necessarily a demerit against him. He's just not as talented as those guys are. It is what it is. So that kind of I don't say it was distracting. Like, he had the physicality aspect for sure, but just dramatically he couldn't quite hang with someone like Tony Long, which again, not that big a surprise, honestly. Um, yeah, I think like if you're into like this style of movie, I think it's still definitely worth a watch. And it's not like there's a ton of movies made about the second Sino-Japanese War, so it's fun, I think, to kind of be in the mix with that, right? Like especially us as Americans, like we know World War II largely through the realm of the Pacific and how the Japanese were fighting the Americans at that point, but not that there's any secret about the Japanese occupation and especially atrocities committed across China. Their obsession with taking over Manchuria is a very big focus in Hidden Blade. But the Chinese specific stuff is largely not uh, dramatized as often as you'd expect, given how vast World War II is and the European Western lean you can expect over in Hollywood. So I think it's definitely still worth a shot, especially for Tony Leung. He's like worth the price of admission, I would say. So yeah, let me know. I mean, what did you think of Hidden Blade? Have you seen it? I saw The Wandering 2 as well. Did a review on that. How'd you like these two movies, which are so different? Let me know. And if more Chinese films are getting releases, I will be talking about them. I'm hoping Full River Red, the Zhang Yimou huge blockbuster, gets a release. If so, I will be talking about it. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. And for more movie reviews, I'll see you next time.